What is Buddhism? Buddhism is a religion based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama. He came to be called the Buddha, which means awakened one, after he experienced a profound realization of the nature of life, death, and existence. The Four Noble Truths are the foundational tenets of Buddhism, which spark awareness of suffering as the nature of existence, its cause, and how to live without it. The truths are the realizations which led to the enlightenment of the Buddha. It comprised the essence of Buddha's teachings. They are the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the end of suffering, and the truth of the path that leads to the end of suffering. I teach suffering, its origin, cessation, and path. That's all I teach, declared the Buddha 2,500 years ago. The Four Noble Truths contain the essence of the Buddha's teachings. It was these four principles that the Buddha came to understand during his meditation under the Bodhi tree. The truth of suffering, Dukkha, the truth of the origin of suffering, Samudaya, the truth of the cessation of suffering, Nirodha, the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering, Magga. The Buddha is often compared to a physician. In the first two noble truths, he diagnosed the problem, suffering, and identified its cause. The third noble truth is the realization that there is a cure. The fourth noble truth, in which the Buddha set out the Eightfold Path, is the prescription, the way to achieve a release from suffering. The first noble truth, suffering, Dukkha. Suffering comes in many forms. Three obvious kinds of suffering correspond to the first three sights the Buddha saw on his first journey outside his palace: old age, sickness, and death. But according to the Buddha, the problem of suffering goes much deeper. Life is not ideal. It frequently fails to live up to our expectations. Human beings are subject to desires and cravings, but even when we are able to satisfy these desires, the satisfaction is only temporary. Pleasure does not last, or if it does, it becomes monotonous. Even when we are not suffering from outward causes like illness or bereavement, we are unfulfilled, unsatisfied. This is the truth of suffering. Some people who encounter this teaching may find it pessimistic. Buddhists find it neither optimistic nor pessimistic, but realistic. Fortunately, the Buddha's teachings do not end with suffering. Rather, they go on to tell us what we can do about it and how to end it. The second noble truth. Origin of suffering, Samudaya. Our day-to-day troubles may seem to have easily identifiable causes: thirst, pain from an injury, sadness from the loss of a loved one. In the second of his noble truths, though, the Buddha claimed to have found the cause of all suffering, and it is much more deeply rooted than our immediate worries. The Buddha taught that the root of all suffering is desire, tanha. This comes in three forms, which he described as the three roots of evil, or the three fires, or the three poisons. The three roots of evil. These are the three ultimate causes of suffering. 1. Greed and desire, represented in art by a rooster. 2. Ignorance or delusion, represented by a pig. Hatred and destructive urges, represented by a snake. 3. Language note. Tanha is a term in Pali, the language of the Buddhist scriptures, that specifically means craving or misplaced desire. Buddhists recognize that there can be positive desires, such as desire for enlightenment and good wishes for others. A neutral term for such desires is shanda. The Fire Sermon. The Buddha taught more about suffering in the Fire Sermon, delivered to 1,000 bhikkhus, Buddhist monks. The Buddha went on to say the same of the other four senses and the mind, showing that attachment to positive, negative, and neutral sensations and thoughts is the cause of suffering. The third noble truth, cessation of suffering, Nirodha. The Buddha taught that the way to extinguish desire, which causes suffering, is to liberate oneself from attachment. This is the third noble truth, the possibility of liberation. The Buddha was a living example that this is possible in a human lifetime. Estrangement here means disenchantment. A Buddhist aims to know sense conditions clearly as they are, without becoming enchanted or misled by them. Nirvana. Nirvana means extinguishing, attaining. Nirvana, reaching enlightenment, means extinguishing the three fires of greed, delusion, and hatred. Someone who reaches nirvana does not immediately disappear to a heavenly realm. Nirvana is better understood as a state of mind that humans can reach. It is a state of profound spiritual joy, without negative emotions and fears. Someone who has attained enlightenment is filled with compassion for all living things. The fourth noble truth path to the cessation of suffering, Magga. The final noble truth is the Buddha's prescription for the end of suffering. This is a set of principles called the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is also called the Middle Way. It avoids both indulgence and severe asceticism, neither of which the Buddha had found helpful in his search for enlightenment. The 8 divisions. The 8 stages are not to be taken in order, but rather support and reinforce each other. Right understanding, samadhi, accepting Buddhist teachings. The Buddha never intended his followers to believe his teachings blindly, but to practice them and judge for themselves whether they were true. Right intention, sammasankappa, a commitment to cultivate the right attitudes. Right speech, sammavaka, speaking truthfully, avoiding slander, gossip, and abusive speech. Right action, sammakamanta, behaving peacefully and harmoniously, refraining from stealing, killing, and overindulgence in sensual pleasure. Right livelihood, samma ajiva, avoiding making a living in ways that cause harm, such as exploiting people or killing animals, or trading in intoxicants or weapons. Right effort, samma vayama, cultivating positive states of mind, freeing oneself from evil and unwholesome states, and preventing them arising in future. Right mindfulness, sammasati, developing awareness of the body, sensations, feelings, and states of mind. Right concentration, sammasamadhi, developing the mental focus necessary for this awareness. The 8 stages can be grouped into wisdom, right understanding and intention, ethical conduct, right speech, action and livelihood, and meditation, right effort, mindfulness, and concentration. The Buddha described the Eightfold Path as a means to enlightenment, like a raft for crossing a river. Once one has reached the opposite shore, one no longer needs the raft and can leave it behind. Happy journey to you. Thank you for watching, and please help spreading the love by hitting the like button and subscribe for more free love.